Right. Thanks again, Prof, for joining us at Anchored in Law. We now move to a segment that deals with leadership. Um, do you consider there to be a difference between, on the one hand, a good leader, and on the other, an effective leader? Can you be a good leader, or can you be a good leader without being an effective leader?
Well, I think a good leader is the one who is able to move a society from one point to another point which is better. And of course, I'm going to use the word better because they are leaders who have left the scene with their countries in ruin. I mean, we know about the Second World War and what happened, how it ended. It ended in ruin. We know about countries that have stopped functioning and so on and so forth. So there is a good leader entails the ability to move and improve the well-being of people.
Yes, you've said somewhere in your book, if I can find it, that he who doesn't read should not lead.
Yeah.
Now, what exactly do you mean by that? Just for the benefit of the general viewership.
I would even add, he who does not read and learn should not read. It should not lead. The reason for that is because the world is very, very complex. The world is very complex, and for you to lead effectively, I think at the bare minimum, you must understand the environment around you. You must understand the challenges that your country is confronting. You must have some ideas about where the solutions are going to come from. So the only way you can be able to get that is through absorbing information. You have to absorb information. How do you absorb information? There are various ways in which people do. In Singapore, for example, before you become a prime minister, they make you go to Harvard School of Governance, government, do the masters in public administration. All of them have done that, you know. And it's a mid-career qualification, which is a refresher course to be able to understand what are the global trends, what are the global trends in terms of problems, what are the global trends in terms of solutions, you know. So reading is another element in which you can absorb information. Today you can watch podcasts that will teach you about artificial intelligence, and you can be intelligent about understanding it without even having gone to school. So I think that is very, very important, that our leaders must be aware of the complexity of the world and how to solve those complexities.
Yes, and you also hold the view, Prof, don't you, that we in South Africa should start voting for the president directly. As I understand you in your book somewhere, the book Leadership Lessons from Books I Have Read, you posit that part of the problem with corruption in South Africa is that we vote for political parties who then select, not elect, select so-called public representatives. And one of the solutions you put forward, in fact, the only solution I have seen, is that we should have an electoral system where perhaps more, not your words, I'm paraphrasing, perhaps something akin to the American system where you can vote directly for a president. A cynic would say, well, if you vote directly for a president, doesn't that bring money into play? Because everyone who's moneyed is going to gravitate towards that person, want to be associated with that person, and therefore it's easier to influence a person than to influence a political party. So you're not really getting rid of the corruption problem. What would you say to those?
If I were to modify that statement, for me, I think the principle that I would like to put forward as far as our electoral reform is concerned is that there has to be a better connectivity with our public representatives and ourselves as voters. And the reason for that is because if I have problems here in Venda, where my parents still live, and I also consider myself a person who live here, and I would like to take it to my member of parliament, I wouldn't be able to know who that person is. And by the way, every member of parliament has a constituency. And Senior Counsel, I would be very, very impressed if you can tell me the member of parliament who is in your constituency. Do you know him or her?
I must confess, I'm ignorant of that, but that's not the fault of the electoral system. It's my fault because I haven't made the effort to go out there to find out.
The reason for that is because they were never on the ballot box. They were never on the ballot box. If they were on the ballot box, you wouldn't have to go and read about them. You wouldn't have to go to a parliamentary constituency office, PCO, to be able to know who your provincial representative is, MPL in your constituency, and or member of parliament is. So I think we should, I think a constituency-based form of public representation, it would be good for South Africa, because at least we can be able to see the faces of the people who are supposed to represent us, and at least we can be able to remove them, because there will be faces that will come after 5 years and say, vote for me, if they are not performing well.
On that very point, in your book, you say, and I'll read an excerpt from it. You say in page 139, it's a chapter that deals with R.R. Palmer and the book, The 12 Who Ruled, right? You say...
The French Revolution.
Yes, you say, and I quote, in his book, The Social Contract, Jean-Jacques Rousseau states that people collectively give their government power to govern in exchange for their protection. If the contract is broken, for example, if the government fails to protect the people, then the people have the right to overthrow the government. I know you're talking about it in the past tense because you're using words like had and so on. Would you say, let me phrase this question gently, would you say that the South African government, I know you're a diplomat now, but it's a question I'd like a straightforward answer to. If you follow Jean-Jacques Rousseau's philosophy in The Social Contract, let me start with this question. Would you say in South Africa that the citizens are getting their votes worth as regards protection?
Well, South Africa has many, many problems. And we have many problems because we are a young nation. We are a young nation. I mean, just to give you an example, when Robespierre read Rousseau and went and overthrew the king, Louis the 16th, and put him into a guillotine. They thought they had
Yes,
solved
I'm
the
sorry,
problem.
Prof. Can I interrupt you? He himself was guillotined in turn later on.
Of
But
course. The
but
third was
I'm sorry, I have to press you on this one. It's just a straightforward answer. Would you say we as voters in South Africa are getting our votes worth as regards security? There have been talks about the high crime rate and so on. I'm asking you to attribute blame to
no, no,
any
no, no, no,
political
no, no,
party
no,
and so
no.
on.
I get that. I think South Africa needs to work harder to reduce crime. That is obvious. Our crime statistics is very, very high. And I do know that it's not an easy thing to do. There is a socio-economic dimension to solving that problem. There is an educational dimension to solving that problem. There is a family dimension. Part of the reason the breakdown of family values as we knew them when we were growing up have to be restored. And it requires more than just government to do that. It requires religious leaders in our society to be able to do that. It requires teachers in our communities to teach the people to be able to do that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yes, we have crime, but solving the crime problem in South Africa will only be done if all of us play our roles. Government, you and I must play our role, and everybody must play their role. I know you think I am avoiding a yes or no answer, but I think I'm just trying to illustrate the complexity of this problem.
Yes, no, I appreciate that, Prof. South Africa has multidimensional problems, and chief among which is, certainly in my view, is the high crime rate. I'm going to move on to the next question for conversation. But just to close off this chapter, I was simply interested in your take on Jean-Jacques Rousseau's philosophy that if government doesn't do its job for the votes that we give it, particularly in relation to protection, then Jean-Jacques Rousseau says the people then have a right to overthrow the government. I suppose
No,
that was in the 1700s.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the license to overthrow the government every 5 years. It's
Absolutely.
called a national election. It's called a national election, democratic society, because of Rousseau and other thinkers of the age of reason. That whole age is called the age of reason. Today you don't have to use the guillotine to do that. You just go to the ballot box and tick for the party that you think is going to solve your problems.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that. I was starting to say that, of course, Rousseau was writing almost in the Middle Ages. That was a long time ago, and there was a different way of resolving national problems at that time. Now, let's look at various leaders that we've had since the dawn of democracy. We've had, was it Prime Minister or President de Klerk in 1990? And then we had, yes, and then we had President Nelson Mandela, who was followed by President Thabo Mbeki, who was followed by President Jacob Zuma, and now we have President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, using all you know and all your experiences in the leadership space, the wisdom that you have gathered from reading all these philosophers, from Plato to Karl Marx to Jean-Jacques Rousseau to Aristotle, all of them, Max Weber, and so on. and I'm going to put you on the spot here, which of the leaders I have just, the list that I've just given you, would you say, of course, taking into account the challenges that each of them was facing at that particular time, which leader would you say today, with today's problems in South Africa, would be best suited to resolve them?
Well, I think our leaders, and I think our leaders must become more technical. And I have spent a lot of time talking about how China has industrialized. Because one of the things that ought to happen in South Africa is that for us to be able to deal with the problems of underdevelopment, we need to develop. So somebody who understands industry, somebody who understands technology and how it is driving change in society would be the best person to take South Africa forward. I think our leaders must be younger. And by the way, that is, I'm actually quoting somebody, Deng Xiaoping, when he was modernizing China. They asked him, they say, why don't you become a president of China? Because he was never president of China. He was never Secretary General of the Communist Party. In fact, at the height of his power, his position was chairman of the Central Military Council. That's it. He was a president in China. It was not him. You know? And they asked him, they said, why don't you become president? He says, no. The presidents must be younger, they must be better educated, and they must be technically competent. Technical in a broader sense, which means if they are lawyers, they must be excellent lawyers. If they are doctors, they must be excellent doctors, because they can be able to use the concept of transfer learning to take their skills to be able to handle the complexities of society. So to answer your question, I would say that we have made mistakes in South Africa, many mistakes. But we have also made excellent gains. South Africa post 1994 South Africa in many ways was a success, but in many ways it was also a failure. And all the people who were in charge of South Africa had successes and they had failures. Our duty as South Africans is to develop a culture that says there is no Messiah who is going to take us to a promised land. We, all of us, must be agents of change.
All right.
I know you will think I'm just avoiding naming individuals.
No, Prof, I take the responsibility. It was an unfair question. I shouldn't have put you in that situation. I'm comfortable with the answer you've given. We'll pause now and then we'll resume in the next segment shortly.